So I'm here with my colleague Gary Unthank, who will chip in every now and again into the presentation.
I'm on standby if Siobhan's voice goes, because really up until yesterday she couldn't speak, so I was a bit worried.
I've been 5 days without a voice, so it's touch and go. So just to give you a little bit of context to what this is about, Gary and I have taught on computer science undergraduate project modules for more than 30 years between us, really. It doesn't bear thinking about. It's a module which the students do in their final year of study. It's worth a third of the whole year, so it really is high stake. And I suppose if you look at it, because what I'm interested in is signature pedagogy, and if you look at it in terms of the temporal aspects of signature pedagogy, the students have had their initial pedagogy where they're learning the different subjects that make up the whole of their computer science degree. They've had that in first and second year. Some of them have gone out on placement, so they've had what we call the capstone apprenticeship when they've done their placement year. We actually view the final year project also as something of a capstone apprenticeship, because they are working for real world clients or proxy sponsors, playing the role of a client. For us as well, the reason why we thought the e-portfolio might be useful in their final year project is because what they do in the project is they show evidence of all of these different components of the computer science degree: the problem analysis and specification, client interaction, product design, build, test, evaluate, all of those things, and we're able to bring them together nicely in the e-portfolio. So they're all computing students, but they're from 7 different programmes within the department. And as I said, some of them have done a placement and some of them aren't. And what you can take from that is we do have students who already behave in a kind of more professional way than some of the others. The supervision process, so it is individual supervision, but it happens in a project room. So it's on the students' timetables, it's on the supervisor's timetables, and for 20 minutes at a time, one supervisor will be sat with one student having a look over the work that they've done since they last saw them. But it's important to note that on our module, the supervisor is not the project sponsor or client. Now, in many universities and many models that are used in computing projects and projects of many different subjects, the supervisor is the client. They're typically getting the student to do some work in their area of research. This isn't how it works for us. We are an institution that has a very big focus on employability, and we feel it's important to separate out the role of a client, who is the person who comes to the student with a genuine problem that needs solving, and then the supervisor who plays an entirely different role in helping the student through their project experience. Also important to note, though, that the supervisor is often the programme leader or personal tutor for the student. And that's important because, again, one of the things that we do in our institution is we like to embed personal development planning within the modules that we teach, and also within the personal tutoring process. So we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, in previous years, so we've only started doing this in this academic year, so we're 7 weeks in. For however many years, more than we care to remember, we've done supervision with paper, with carbonated copies. So the student would come into the room and the supervisor would make notes, give the student advice, and tear off 1 copy, give 1 to the student, and we would keep a copy for the supervision file.
Yeah, obviously they're computer science students, so they all just lost their copies.
Yeah, paper has no place in a computer science student's bag. They don't even have bags, actually. But it was very easy to do, but I've listed a number of difficulties that would come with that, not least of which is deciphering the handwriting of a computer science tutor. One of the big things for me, I think, is that supervision could feel very after the fact. So you're kind of seeing what the student's done for the previous 2 weeks, but it's sort of too late to intervene. And it just feels like you're there to sort of rubber stamp it. And also the weaker students could quite often bury their heads that if they hadn't done any work, they would come along and say, oh, I forgot to bring any evidence of what I've done this week, or they might not turn up at all. So we started using Mahara, and we had in fact been using it for the last 6 years with our first year students. So of course these students who are now in final year now were a few years ago in first year and did use Mahara, an earlier version of it that we were using it with very much less structure with the first years, and it was a bit less focused, so it wasn't connected to a project. We made the mistake really for successive years in saying, here's a nice tool that we would like you to use. We know that, you know, you're born, you grow up connected to the internet, so you know how to do this stuff, and you're computer science students, so just go and play with it.
Yeah, we thought they'd all be able to use Mahara without really any, because they're computer students, but
it surprised us that they didn't. They just kind of went, what's this thing you want us to play with? And that kind of continued for a couple of years, really. So when we said we were going to use it in final year project this year, there was a little bit of trepidation with the tutors themselves, and also with the students. So we got comments from students recently, and they say things like that, oh no, that thing that you made us use in first year, not sure about that. But it was a new and improved version. We could see immediately, oh, it's got a nice interface and it's got new and improved functionality. I did an online course in ePortfolios over the summer as well, so I kind of came back from my summer break thinking, oh, this is great, I'm really fired up with ePortfolios. So we were quite hopeful that, you know, this would go better than previously. Initially, what we were trying to do was we were trying to make sure that students came on board, that they didn't bury their head in the sands, that we'd be able to track what they were doing, we'd be able to encourage what they were doing because we could see what they were doing as they were doing it. And I think when we say we want to encourage, we want to encourage them to be involved in their project on a regular basis, what we're saying is we want them to behave in a professional way. So again, this idea of signature pedagogies, where really what we see the project as being is preparation for accomplished and responsible practice. And that's really what we're trying to instill in the students. The project, because it's a computer science project and it's essentially software engineering. Now I teach software engineering to the students in first year and in final year via this module. And at the top is a definition that I give to the first year students about what software engineering is. And really I could see that in translating that to a signature pedagogy, how should we be teaching software engineering to our students? There was a lot of coincidence with what we tried to do on a project module. So the idea that it's problematized, you talk to somebody, you say, what's your current situation? And you turn that into a problem that you need to solve for them. It's very systematic, so we don't want the students to just do everything at the last minute. It's very important that they behave in a methodical way, that they do things week by week. They don't just leave it until the night before, etc. So it's very controlled, it's well project managed, it's very hands-on, and that includes the supervisor looking into what they're doing and being able to give the feedback. So it's very interactive and reactive, and it's team-based. We already did peer review in the project. We get the students hand in work as an interim deliverable, and they peer review each other's work. So we're kind of just trying to continue doing those things, but in a more accessible way for the students. So what did we do 7 weeks ago? Gary came up with a template that we wanted the students to use and worked with students and staff on that.
It's interesting, like for me, coming today and discovering what other people have done, and like we didn't get them to copy the template. We made them actually make all the pages and make this as a template, so that they then would know that our starting point would be that they should be able to add all the Mahara tools that are in it, but also because my background really is I'm sort of non-native mobile app developer. So in a computer science program, so we're hoping that they'll add more functionality than the default. So we really wanted them to own the pages, and that has been true of the better ones so far for all.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure whether you can see the writing on that, but it's similar to one of the things that we just saw actually, where it's divided into the stages in a project. So we've got blog and supervision record. They're both blogs, incidentally. So the first column, blog, is a student. We're trying to get them to do something in a very much ad hoc basis. Every time you do 10 minutes work or an hour's work or 2 hours work, just write down what you've been doing. So that one's very informal and doesn't necessarily have to be shown to the supervisor. Supervision record is a more formalised blog. So the students come into supervision and they've already written what they've been doing, and then the supervisor is able to comment on that. And then all of the other...
just so that we would... I mean, I know like it's very an open source community, But we did sort of sell the idea that the journal tool was very much like a Facebook timeline, and the idea being if they used it in the same idea that in between their lectures they spent 10-15 minutes doing stuff, then it would sort of build naturally.
Yeah. And that idea of building naturally is there as well. So there are various things that they're handing in as they go along in the module. So the initial proposal, they do a schedule for the work that they're going to do over 24 weeks. And their first handing is a definitive brief. And then we've got really the classic stages that you have in any dissertation type module. So literature review, analysis and design, development and testing, and evaluation. So it's all the stages. And what we're trying to say to the students is, you know, a dissertation which is 15,000 words thick is not something that you can kind of just write in a week before you hand in. But actually, if you're dropping stuff into those tabs week by week, you'll soon be surprised by, you know, how much you've got. But other than setting that up, it was pretty much work as usual. The students would just carry on doing what they were doing. But the e-portfolio was going to be used as a vehicle for supervision. So as soon as they came into the room to have their supervision with their supervisor, it would be this that we would be looking at. So we're not very far in. We hoped that we would be able to say something about whether or not they had improved marks compared to last year's students at this first assessment point, but it's just too early. The tutors just said to me, no, I've only had it a week, I haven't been able to turn it around yet. But we can start to draw some tentative conclusions, I think. So I did give the students, I sent out a questionnaire, and I haven't had a huge number of responses, but I have had some, and what I'm showing you on these 3 slides is the things that the students showed strong agreement with. So this was every student who replied agreed, or maybe about 80% agreed with these comments. And on the next one, this was some agreement, so this is kind of in the region of 60-50% agreement from those who responded. And where I've written not many at this stage yet, it's really because some students were saying, yes, I've also been able to show my client, who would be somebody external to the university, I've been able to show those things that I've been doing along the way. And I think it's just the fact that not many students have had very many client interactions this early on in the module, that maybe more of them didn't agree with that. And similarly, when we're talking about, we were hoping that we would see a lot of very media-rich uploads, not just text documents. And that's not necessarily happening yet, but it may be just the stage that they're at in their project. They're not really onto their designs and their development yet. And then these are the comments where there was no agreement as of yet. And the big one for me really is this one at the bottom, because this is really what we want to get to. And I feel like using the e-portfolio is helping with my professional development, and nobody ticked that. And I thought, oh, that's really surprising. But then I thought, but actually everything that they've ticked previously, that's the sum of the parts of professional behaviour. So when they're saying they're doing things on time and you know all of these other things, that adds up to being professional behaviour. So actually I think that is happening. Here's a sample where we can look into a student. So we've spoken to some students and asked them, are we okay to show these today? And they're quite happy for us to. So we're just going to show you some of the things that they've been uploading. So this is a student's blog. So actually this is his informal journal where he's not necessarily expecting anyone to look at it, but it's still quite formal, and there's a lot there really just for 1 week. And then I've overlaid some comments that students have made, just so that you can read what they've said in their free text responses. So personally, I think the e-portfolio is allowing us to monitor our progress much better than last year's paper-based systems. Fortunately, this is a student who is, for personal reasons, he's repeating his final year. So he's actually been through both processes, or at least part of both processes. And then again, you can see some of his comments. Again, computing students don't carry bits of paper around really. Maybe no students do anymore. Another student, again this time looking at his supervision record, so a bit more formalised. He's kind of documenting how many hours he's spent on each thing, and explaining why he's done things in certain ways. Another student, so I think one of the things for us is, because we've imposed a structure, so we're kind of learning from what we've done with the first years, where we said, do what you like on this, more or less. It wasn't quite that free and easy, but more or less. And then they didn't. And so this time we've kind of given them a structure that we want them to follow. And I know that goes against everything that you're supposed to do really with e-portfolios. You're supposed to allow them the freedom to do what they want to do. And I think that's something that we're still wrestling with a bit. So yes, they might customise it, you know, do slightly different colours and things like that. But I think we need to think about ways for them to also do things that are a little bit more free and easy. So a student here uploading lots of different types of files, stuff that she's been working on. And I like this. We didn't necessarily have a picture that went with this because we were only looking within one single module. But this student's saying actually he's keeping an e-portfolio for what he's doing on his other modules as well, which I think is quite nice to see. So from staff, we wanted to know, are the students doing anything differently to what they normally do? And we've got a mixed bag of responses from staff, I think. So they range from no, not really, to yes in lots of ways, I think. Bit of a variation there. I think people are thinking, well, the students who are doing a lot, which I'm pleased to see, it might be that they are the more mature students who've come back from placement and would always do that extra bit of work as well. So we are getting a little bit of that kind of feedback also. The point about there may be a slight improvement in the timeliness of when students do things, I think we are seeing this. So for example, they'll go out and they'll have meetings with their clients, and typically they would come along to a supervision session and you'd say, how many client meetings have you had? Oh, I've had 3 now. Can I see the evidence for that? And they would say, oh, I haven't written it up yet. And you would wait months until you saw that sort of thing being written up. But now they're getting onto it straight away because they know they can do it and they can upload it and then they can forget about it. This for us is a really interesting one. Has the supervisor role changed? And again, we've got a split really in staff who feel that it hasn't, and staff who feel that it has. I'm one of those who feel it has, and I know Gary is too. But these are the sort of responses that we're getting. And there is a bit of a tension really, which I can show you on the next slide. For me, I need to explore a little bit more whether this is what's at the core of it, because some staff were saying things that were about, well, kind of it's about me, really. You know, they're saying, well, I'm busy typing in feedback and I'm not quite sure which page to do it on, and I'm making lots of typing mistakes. So that you kind of think, well, really, does that matter? I know that we've talked about when we're doing ours, you can kind of type in your feedback in shorthand and the students understand it. It's not about...
There's definitely an age thing going on with the staff. There being ages, but some staff like to...
Without saying that, were you young?
Well, no, we're not young either. So we write really short things and they understand it, but some staff still want a paper copy where they can write feedback on, which is like... We were seeing some of the earlier talks. And I think if the staff who can touch type, the younger staff, they're quite happy. It's like I can't touch type, so it's like...
But there also seems to be, and I think this warrants further investigation, a kind of feeling of the staff who really want to be very much in control of the students' project. And I know for me, I feel like I'm writing a lot less than I used to on the paper-based. Some other staff are saying that and think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because I'm spending a lot of time, just looking over all the different stuff they're doing, telling them verbally what I think is great, what could be improved, etc. And then... It's actually, I think you can spend more time in that kind of encouragement role where you're just saying to them, well, look at this, what you've got over here, and look at all of these things that you've got. And you really kind of, I think in the abstract I said something about, working in agile teams. So this is a software engineering project and we are preparing students for going out and working with clients and being software developers. And typically they do that in an agile fashion in business and industry these days. I think that our project supervision was a little bit behind the times. It's fair to say, we were using the paper-based approach. We were very, very old-fashioned in more than one way. And I think the ability to stop trying to project manage a student's project and actually say, well, okay, if we look at this in terms of being a Scrum team, we're doing agile development. If I can just be your Scrum master and play the role where I'm encouraging, I'm facilitating, I'm seeing if there's anything that I could help improve on, and that's it. Other than that, I'll step back. And I actually think that that's really where we're moving towards. But we'll see how it goes. And really, that's it.